May brings a powerful shift. It is a month where many things begin to turn, not slowly and quietly, but visibly, not hidden behind the scenes, but felt directly in your daily life, in your body, and on the global stage. We will experience two major planetary shifts. The lunar nodes are changing signs, and planet Jupiter, the planet of truth, of expansion and ethical alignment, is beginning a new year cycle. With this, the course of events changes, because the lunar nodes do not only speak of personal development, they represent the destiny of humanity. This is a real game changer. What exactly this means for the world, for you, and for what now wants to be seen. That is what this astrological update for May 2025 is all about. And I invite you to stay with me until the end, because we are not only looking at the general energies, but also how they will unfold specifically in the United States, Ukraine, and in the conflict in the Middle East. I'm sharing many important insights in this video. But more than that, I will offer you guidance on how to move with these energies instead of against them. But before we begin, a warm welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Sylvia Suryodaya Group. I'm a psychic medium, I'm a healer, a messenger of the spirit world, and a Vedic astrologer. If you want to stay connected with the current energies on a regular basis, feel free to sign up for my free weekly newsletter. You will find the link right below this video. And now, before we look at this game-changing month of May, let's take a quick look back. What happened in April, and how exactly did the previous predictions unfold? In my April update, I said this: during the first 2 weeks of April, an extremely dense and volatile planetary alignment is active. Saturn is in an aspect to Uranus between 0 and 1 degree, while at the same time Saturn is tight conjunct with the upper lunar node Rahu at 2 to 3 degrees in Pisces. And we experience these energies also right now. Saturn stands for structure, order, discipline, but also for control, delay, and karmic heaviness. Uranus brings the exact opposite: disruption, rebellion, sudden change, unpredictability. And the aspect between these two planets shows very clearly the old and the new collide, not gently, not in harmony, but in a deeper inner resistance. What has been held together for too long wants to be released. What has become rigid begins to crack. And there's more. Uranus is currently in the sign of Taurus, an earth sign that represents security, resources, stability, and the physical body. And that is exactly where Uranus brings restlessness and instability. In financial systems, in how we experience safety, and in physical structures as well. And do you remember what happened exactly during this time? Exactly. Trump's so-called Liberation Day on April the 2nd, where he imposed extreme tariffs. The stock market dropped immediately and global uncertainty exploded. Not gradually, but like a collective shock on a scale we have not seen in a long time. And that was not all. These planetary tensions also manifested physically. Over 150 tornadoes swept through the United States, especially across the South and Midwest. and in Italy and Switzerland massive storms and floods occurred, and power outages, right in the middle of this highly charged energetic window. And the earthquake in Myanmar, also sadly a clear hit of my predictions. It happened on March 28, just before April began, and my April update was already out by then. Of course, it's difficult to predict the exact timing of events, but energetically it was precisely the scenario I had described. I spoke about this configuration can discharge through tectonic tension, both outwardly and inwardly. Where pressure has built up for too long, it can suddenly break open. All of this shows how deeply the planetary movements are felt on a collective level, not only in politics, but also in nature, in the markets, and in our own bodies. When something releases, it is not by chance. It is because the stars have already shown us the pressure. And that is exactly why it is also important that we now look forward. What does May bring? And why is this month such a cosmic turning point? Let's start. Planet Pluto will turn retrograde on May the 4th and remain so until October the 14th. At the same time, Saturn has changed its lunar mansion. Saturn now moves through Uttara Bhadrapada, and that alone shifts the energetic atmosphere significantly, because this is not about a few intense days, but about deep hidden layers of power, of karma, and collective transformation. Pluto turning retrograde means the old shadows begin to tremble, not just on political stages, but within everybody. In structures you may have carried with you for years, even though they have long begun to limit you. Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn, the sign of institutions, authority, control, hierarchy, and fear-based systems. This retrograde acts like an energetic aftershock. It reveals what is no longer sustainable, even if it still resists being let go. And here lies the tension. What does not transform willingly will be dissolved from within, in the large systems and in the very small. In this time we may see political scandals, power shifts, sudden breakdowns. But maybe you also feel it in yourself. Something inside you no longer wants to stay in the old role. Something in you says, this cannot continue the way it has. And yes, this can be unsettling. It can hurt, because transformation is rarely comfortable, but it is always needed. Saturn in the lunar mansion Uttara Bhadrapada adds a second precise frequency. This energy is ancient, it is wise and uncompromising. It wants no more masks, no more half-truths or soft lies. It brings into light what is ready for responsibility, for truth, for clarity. It is about the release of karmic debts, both individually and collectively. And many people feel this, even if they cannot put it into words. A kind of inner heaviness, a sharp clarity, almost too sharp, a knowing deep down that something is ending, and at the same time a longing to finally live authentically. This combination of Pluto and Saturn is very powerful. It touches us all, especially where we still try to hold on, to an old system, to an old role, to an idea of who we think we are supposed to be. But beneath the surface, the quiet rebellion has already begun. Maybe you feel it too. What does all of this mean for the world? The retrograde movement of Pluto in Capricorn, together with Saturn in Uttara Bhadrapada, opens a karmic door. With abuse of power, geopolitical pressure, and deep economic tension. This is no longer just about political rhetoric or ideological camps. It now reaches the core: land, resources, territory, trade routes, supply chains, and above all, who has access and who does not. This dynamic is clearly reflected in current developments: tariffs, economic protectionism, new policies, and most of all, a growing readiness to escalate conflicts, not through dialogue, but through economic or political pressure. In the United States, this became evident already in April, when Donald Trump declared his so-called Liberation Day. A new phase was triggered. High tariffs were imposed, and the markets responded immediately. Stock prices dropped, and the sense of uncertainty spread globally, not just in numbers, but in people's nervous systems. I remember that day clearly. I recorded a daily update before and spoke in this update about those energies, about the markets. And then exactly this happens. And exactly these energies are now continuing to unfold. And they will intensify. The deeper Saturn moves through Uttara Bhadrapada, and the more Pluto retrogrades through these karmic layers of the collective. An old but dangerous idea has returned: protectionism, but without a mask, not as an exception, but as a new normal. What we call trade wars are in truth proxy conflicts. They reflect something much deeper: who owns the world, and who decides how it develops. We will feel these tensions throughout the year, in decisions that may seem rational on the surface, but are actually driven by fear, loss of control, and the urge to dominate. But there is also hope. And we will get to that in a moment. Because wherever pressure arises, consciousness begins to open. And especially in the national horoscopes, we will see how this will unfold. Most notably in the United States. There we can see where this pressure is hitting the people directly. Because this energies activates not only the third but also the fourth house. A house that astrologically stands not only for the territory of a country but for the emotional field of the people. It represents the home, the sense of belonging, the need for safety and nourishment, or the feeling of deep insecurity. And it is exactly there, in the innermost emotional space, that the energies of May will be felt most strongly. On May the 14th or 15th, it depends on where you are on Earth, planet Jupiter moves into the sign of Gemini and will remain there until June the 1st, 2026. That's just over a year, and it will deeply affect our collective thinking. Jupiter brings with it a noticeable shift in how we perceive truth, knowledge, education, communication, and our deeper ethical orientation. Jupiter represents wisdom, expansion, integrity, and the inner compass by which a society aligns itself. But when Jupiter enters Gemini, he leaves the familiar behind. He enters a sign that is multivocal, curious, contradictory, and often fragmented. An air sign that thinks, networks, and questions, but rarely pauses. Truth becomes scattered. What does that mean? Gemini is not a place for one single truth. It is a field filled with information, perspectives, voices, and opinions. And Jupiter tries to create order within that. But that order can only arise through awareness, not through control. And this is where the inner conflict begins. How can clarity emerge when everyone holds their own version of truth? How do we find direction when everything sounds right or at least feels valid? Many people will feel this in their daily lives. Confusion, overload, decision fatigue, too many impressions and too little clarity, but also a new openness, a fresh curiosity to think differently. This transit can overwhelm, but it can also liberate. And if you feel that your perspective on the world is shifting, you are not alone. The collective is currently searching for a new framework for what it means to call something true. What this Jupiter shift means for you personally can be seen in your Vedic birth horoscope, because Vedic astrology is not just calculated differently than Western astrology, it goes much deeper. It looks at your soul plan. If you don't have your Vedic birth chart yet, you can order it through our online shop. You will find the link directly below this video. And you will receive it together with a short explanation PDF, so you can immediately understand which areas of your life are being activated now. And by the way, Jupiter in Gemini also brings a rapid expansion of technological innovation, especially in the areas of communication, media, learning, and digital tools. We are already seeing this, an explosive rise in artificial intelligence, new learning models, and an ever deeper integration of networks, platforms, language models, and automated knowledge systems into our daily lives. You see it also on YouTube. And with that comes a growing question. Who decides what we know and what we do not? Because as digital knowledge expands, so does the power of information, and with it the risk of manipulation, distortion, and engineered perception. But again, how this Jupiter energy shows up in your personal life depends on your individual chart. It marks a huge difference which house Jupiter activates, which era of your life this transformation, opening, or even uncertainty affects. I will be releasing a separate video where I explain the Jupiter transit for all 12 Vedic ascendants. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Planet Jupiter brings many positive and supportive impulses, but he also carries his shadows. On one hand, he leaves the sign of Taurus, which may help ease inflationary tendencies. But at the same time, this shift into Gemini brings new pressure points, especially in areas like supply systems, food security, and raw materials. And we are already seeing this play out. for example through the aggressive tariff policies of Donald Trump, which are visibly destabilizing global balance. In its positive expression, this transit brings curiosity, openness, dialogue, exchange, creative connection, but in its shadow, division, confusion, polarization. Gemini is the sign of language, and when Jupiter enters this realm, information and opinion become tools, and tools can become instruments of power. This leads us directly to the question, who is still allowed to speak freely, and who decides that? Boundaries also come into focus, not just geopolitical boundaries, but also emotional, social, and cultural ones, crossing borders, questions of national identity, regional tensions, and all of that may now come to the surface. Jupiter in Gemini does not bring clear answers. Jupiter brings questions, and maybe that is the real invitation of this time, not to insist on being right, but to listen without losing yourself, to stay open to new perspectives without placing them above your own, but also without making yourself smaller. And there is one theme that will become even more visible under this transit, not only in May, but throughout the entire coming year, the theme of censorship. Jupiter stands for truth, ethics, justice, and intellectual integrity, and Gemini stands for language, opinion, media, and expression. And exactly there, tension begins to unfold. What we already feel around the world will intensify under this transit, the restriction of free speech. Sometimes subtle, sometimes open, sometimes through laws, sometimes through algorithms, sometimes through public outrage, and sometimes through quiet deletion. And maybe at some point you will find yourself asking who owns the truth and who is filtering it. In the United States, this is already becoming very clear. With Donald Trump's return to the political stage, one thing is evident. Only those who align with his direction are supported. Free debate is increasingly replaced by strategic conformity. And those who speak out risk becoming a personal target. This development does not go unnoticed in the collective field. Many people feel deep inside that something is shifting, that the freedom they once took for granted is now becoming conditional. And that leads us to a very real and serious question. What is still allowed to be said, and who decides that? What is an opinion, and what is opinion control? Where are the lines between free expression and social enforcement? In this atmosphere, a growing sense of insecurity arises. Many people withdraw, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Others retreat into echo chambers just to protect themselves. And this is exactly the dynamic that Rahu, we will soon speak about Rahu in the sign of Aquarius, intensifies. Rahu in Aquarius does not only bring progress, technology, and network-based thinking. Rahu also brings confusion, information overload, and lack of clarity. Aquarius stands for public life, collective systems, and new social structures. But with Rahu, this field becomes messy, exaggerated, and unclear. More and more information circulates, but it is not always the truth. It becomes less about what is said and more about who gets to speak, who is heard, who dominates the narrative, who owns the truth, and who controls access to it. These are not abstract questions. They touch all of us, because language is not only information, it is the foundation of relationship, identity, and orientation. And when language becomes distorted, the very sense of reality begins to unravel. On May the 29th, Rahu, the north node of the moon, will move into the sign of Aquarius. And at the same time, Ketu, its opposite pole, moves into Leo. But as always with the lunar nodes, this shift is felt weeks before it becomes exact. Something is moving. Something begins to pull you into a new direction that we could not fully grasp before. Your thoughts begin to circle differently. Your perception opens or begins to close in. And maybe you are already noticing it. Things are getting louder in your mind, but more diffuse in your feelings. This is Rahu. And this is the moment before the shift. The lunar nodes are not planets. They are energetic points, intersections between the sun and the moon, between light and rhythm, between consciousness and feeling. They symbolize what touches us as human beings most deeply, our destiny. Because no celestial bodies are more visible, more familiar, or more constant to us than the sun and the moon. The sun shows you the light, your power, your self-expression. The moon shows you your feelings, your needs, your soul mission. And exactly in between, the lunar nodes are at work. They show you where you come from and where you are going, what you are here to learn, what you are meant to release, what you have yet to understand, and what is finally ready to be seen. They carry an energy that cannot be grasped, but is deeply felt, like electric current woven into the cosmic fabric. They are the driving force behind movement, evolution, and transformation. The lunar nodes do not just show you your themes. They help you recognize your soul's journey and to shape it consciously. Not perfectly, but authentically. Not with control, but with alignment. Rahu, the north node, also called the head without the body, pulls you toward new experiences, new worlds, new obsessions. He wants more influence, more knowledge, more power, more freedom, more of everything, even when the body is already exhausted. Rahu is desire. Rahu is fire. He is the hunger for expansion. He drives us forward, and he does not ask what it might cost. Sometimes we only realize later that we were pulled into something that cost us more than we thought. But this is also where his gift lies. He shows you where you want to grow, maybe more than you ever allowed yourself to imagine. Many people see the lunar nodes only in a negative light. They say, without desire and rejection, everything would be peaceful, everything would be easy. But life does not work like that. Life needs tension. It needs friction. It needs contrast. It needs movement. Without shadow, there is no light. Without challenge, no depth. Without evolution, no soul. And that is exactly what the lunar nodes bring, not as a punishment, but as a driving force of your evolution. Rahu is the impulse that pulls you beyond yourself. He takes you into unknown territories, even when you hesitate inside. He is the pulse, he is the flame, the urge to experience something new, to go beyond your limits. Ketu, the south node, is the body without a head. He pulls you back toward your essence. He takes from you what you no longer need, but often in ways that feel like a sudden loss. Ketu follows a radical kind of logic, not because you are being punished, but because what you were holding onto is no longer necessary. And yes, that can feel painful. It can shake your ground. It can bring disorientation. Or, if you're willing not to fight against it, it can bring profound insight. And Ketu can lead to headless action, both literally and symbolically. And a powerful example was the conjunction of Mars and Ketu on October the 7th, 2023, the day of the attack on Israel took place. And I'm not here to judge what is right or wrong, but astrologically it is a powerful demonstration of how sudden, unfiltered and explosive this energy can be when Mars action meets Ketu disintegration. Without awareness, without guidance, without integration. And this is exactly why it is always significant when the lunar nodes change signs. And you might also remember I predicted this terroristic attack shortly before. Because when the nodes shift, the direction of the collective consciousness begins to move. It is not an isolated event. It is a change in course. For the next 1.5 years, these new frequencies will be active, not only globally, but also within you. They change what matters to you. They change what you need to let go of, and what you can no longer hold back. Rahu enters the sign of Aquarius, the Rome of the future, technology, networks, social systems, and collective visions. Ketu retreats into Leo, the sign of personal power, leadership, and sovereignty, and inner pride. This axis asks you directly, where do you want to go, and what is still holding you back? Where is your place in society, and where do you need to feel again who you truly are, when the old role no longer fits? So what does this shift mean for the world, for systems, and for you on a personal level? Let's take a closer look together. Starting on May the 29th, 2025, this new phase official begins. Rahu enters Aquarius and Ketu enters Leo. And this axis will remain active until the end of 2026. This is not a small movement. It is a collective course correction with massive influence on how we think, how we organize our world, and how we orient ourselves from within. Rahu in Aquarius brings the focus to future technologies, social networks, systemic transformation, and mental independence. And with that, one big question arises. How do we want to live together in the future? Rahu accelerates everything related to these themes. We are witnessing explosive growth in artificial intelligence, digital systems and media power, and structural innovation. New social models, thought frameworks and movements are spreading at lightning speed. But at the same time, there is also extremism, polarization, and ideological radicalization. Because Rahu in Aquarius does not ask ethical questions. He does not ask, is this right or wrong? He only wants more, faster, further. And all of that without regard for what might be lost, for humanity, for balance, for depth. We are already seeing how this is beginning to manifest. For example, in Donald Trump's decision to make tariffs and economic isolation no longer an exception but a new normal. What appears as an economic move on the surface is in truth a proxy conflict, because trade wars are not just financial maneuvers, they are expressions of power struggles, identity crisis, and deep collective insecurity. And it is exactly this Rahu-Ketu axis that is now touching the 4th and 3rd house in the United States. The 4th house stands for the land itself, for territory, for home, for the sense of safety and stability. And when this axis is activated, it is no longer just about foreign policy. It is about the core of a country. And the deeper question, what does security even mean anymore? In a world that is changing so quickly. In Germany, this is also already becoming tangible. Friedrich Merz recently announced his intention to deliver Taurus cruise missiles, a move which carries the clear energetic signature of entering a war field, because whoever delivers strategic offensive weapons is no longer just involved. They are stepping onto the battlefield. In the United States, we see a deep internal division, something I have spoken about in earlier updates. 2 eclipses have passed through the country. The annular solar eclipse in October 2023 and a total solar eclipse on April the 8th, 2024. Their lines intersected directly over Texas, and it is exactly there that we are now beginning to see that these energies have set something very important in motion, but more on this in several videos. We see a growing divide that is pulling the country apart between those who still stand behind Trump and those who are deeply disappointed by broken promises, by economic strain, by increasing uncertainty. People feel stability is not coming, confrontation is, and fear is rising, not just economically, but emotionally, as prices rise and jobs become less secure or are lost, and the trust in politics continues to erode. A large question begins to emerge. What is happening to democracy when it is no longer carried out on equal ground? The world is watching with wonder, with concern, and with a quiet knowing. Someone here is trying to become a king in a country that never wanted a king. And it is in exactly this atmosphere, in the midst of these inner and outer tensions, that American democracy begins to change, not all at once, but step by step. Now let's take a closer look at what the South Node Ketu's shift into the sign of Leo means, before we dive into the country-specific forecasts for May. And as I mentioned earlier, I will also release a separate video to show you what these energies means for you on a personal level. And also check out my daily daily videos on YouTube where I give a lot of information and support. Ketu moves into the sign of Leo, and with that, the way we deal with power, leadership, and identity begins to shift, not only on a political level, but within you. Leo stands for the king, for pride, for self-expression and charisma, for the strength to stand in your center and radiate something that comes deeply from within. But Leo is also the sign of performance, of visibility, of the stage, whether what is shown is real or just a polished facade. And this is exactly where Ketu pulls the energy away, not out of judgment, but out of reduction. He takes away the spotlight and leaves you with one simple question: who are you really when no one is clapping? We will see many nations begin to redefine their national identity, no longer with great words, but it is about authenticity. It is a quiet energy, and it needs to set boundaries, to define yourself in a new way. Ketu in Leo acts like a retreat into your own essence. Ketu is not interested in the big show. Ketu wants the root, the truth, the silent power behind the symbol. This becomes especially visible in the symbol of the flag, not just as an external emblem, but as a carrier of collective memory, pain, pride, and belonging. Many countries will begin to reinterpret their flags, not as tools of outward domination, but as inward reminders. Who are we when we stop trying to be someone? This means less international symbolic politics, more return to the national level, a stronger focus on our land, our people, our story, not out of isolation, but as an honest search for identity. And it is exactly through this shift that global alliances like the NATO come under pressure. I will soon release an astrological analysis of the NATO birth horoscope, because the question arises: would it really be a loss for some countries to leave NATO? Or could it be a form of liberation? A pact that presents itself as international, but in truth primarily serves the interests of the United States. So how much sovereignty remains for the individual member states? But now let's dive deeper into the country horoscopes. We start with the United States. In May, the United States is experiencing a compression on multiple levels. Planet Jupiter enters the 7th house in the sign of Gemini, and already there we find in the birth horoscope Mars, Venus, Jupiter and the Sun. The 7th house represents international relationships, treaties and alliances, but also open confrontation with others. And with this transit, one thing becomes clear. This is no longer about negotiations, it is about decision making. And these decisions have the potential to affect major global structures, such as NATO, especially now that the United States officially withdraw from the WHO in January. Jupiter also aspects the ascendant in Sagittarius and the 3rd house in Aquarius, where the moon is located. This means the public is emotionally swept up. Narratives, language, and media images carry a power that does not just inform. It is manipulative. What is said determines what is believed, and what is not said disappears from reality. Media becomes a weapon with full force, and Jupiter will stay in Gemini for a full year. This dynamic will not slow down, it will only expand further. On May the 9th, Mars transits directly over the USA's natal Rahu in the 8th house, the house of power, intelligence, agencies, control, transformation, and collective fear. This can trigger crises and escalations, secret operations, and major revelations. And we are already witnessing this tension in real time, unfiltered through the presence and statements of Donald Trump. Rahu moves into the 3rd house in the sign of Aquarius for 18 months, landing directly on the natal moon. So communication now becomes central, but not transparent. It is no longer just about information. It is about controlling opinions, digital manipulation, and international polarization. Disinformation becomes part of daily life. And Jupiter, who is meant to bring clarity, only amplifies Rahu's energy further. This may also indicate cyber warfare, military tactics, and technology used as weapon. Meanwhile, Ketu retreats in the 9th house, the realm of law, of constitution, of ideologies, education, and internal order. There it joins Gulika and Mandi, the shadow aspects of Saturn. This creates a field of loss, shadow structures, and internal withdrawal. What we are witnessing is a slow erosion of law and ethics, a system that may still function formally, but is losing its inner legacy. Freedom of speech is becoming a nostalgic concept. Those who do not align with Trump's narrative are being excluded or silenced. The moral compass begins to waver, and the image of America as the land of the free fades under the pressure of this new reality. And even if not everything is fully visible yet, the belief of the Constitution in justice, in a right America, is beginning to crack. Let us hope it does not lead to further deportations of innocent people, as we saw recently with removals to El Salvador. Because this too is Rahu in his unbound form. He does not ask about justice. He does not ask about the heart. He only asks about power. For Ukraine, in May, Jupiter moves into the 6th house in the sign of Gemini. And this is not a relief, because the 6th house in a national chart represents conflict, war, resistance, enemies, and survival. Jupiter does not bring resolution there. He brings expansion, more pressure, more fronts, more energy into the field of confrontation. The war is not retreating, it is shifting, refining itself, expanding its reach, politically, economically, and geographically. It does not only cost lives, it costs unimaginable sums of money, and it brings new debts, for example, through the resource deal with the United States. At the same time, Jupiter aspects the 12th house. This opens a field for secret negotiations, hidden withdrawals, or covert arms deliveries, things that are not openly communicated. What appears calm on the outside may in fact be the opposite. Silence does not mean safety. Pluto turns retrograde in the first house in the sign of Capricorn, together with Saturn and the Moon. This combination is deep, heavy, karmic. The Moon represents the people, the emotional condition of the nation, and it sits exactly where the pressure is strongest. And you can feel it. People are tired, worn out, exhausted, not only physically, but emotionally. Many are only functioning because they have no other choice. And that is what Pluto reveals: a nation at its limit, a soul in a state of emergency. Mars in the 7th house, in the sign of Cancer, opposite to Pluto in the 1st house. This is heavy. Mars stands for action. Mars stands for attacks, and the 7th house for open enemies. And when Mars opposes Pluto, it means escalation, confrontation, a battle of power. Now everything is at stake. This is not an energy of resolution, not for politics, and certainly not good for the people, those who must live, hope and survive in the midst of these transits. Ketu also moves in the 8th house in the Ukraine chart, into the sign of Leo, and in that house sits the Sun. The Sun speaks about leadership. And as I have said before, astrologically, Zelensky's time is over, not necessarily visibly, but energetically already disconnected. Ketu withdraws the energy from where leadership is no longer a calling, but merely a role. And the 8th house is the house of loss of control. This is not about a single dramatic event. It is about a slow but unmistakable withdrawal of influence. When something can no longer sustain itself because the energy behind it is no longer alive. For Israel, Mars is in the transit in the 11th house, in the sign of Cancer, where also the Moon sits. And the Moon stands for the people, and also Cancer stands for the people. And the 11th house for social groups, political movements, uprisings, and collective dynamics. And Mars brings the fire to this area. It brings pressure. It brings no release. What is now emerging is more than outrage. It is a deep collective exhaustion that is turning into anger. The protests against the Netanyahu government are growing, not only politically, but with deep emotional intensity, because this war is eating into people's souls, into families, into the streets, into their bodies. More and more people want answers, not later, but now. And so they are beginning to reorganize themselves. In May, Israel stands at a threshold between holding on and collapse. People are tired and more awake than ever. Awake to what no longer works. Awake to what was sold as strange but is in truth only inner tension. And what is breaking open now cannot be undone. For Iran, Mars will be in the 1st house in the sign of Cancer. This house represents the country itself, its image, its stance, its self-perception. And here Mars acts like a spark: tension, readiness to react, military focus, a wounded national identity. Mars also aspects the Sun in the 9th house, which stands for the government, international relations, and ideological positioning. This combination is explosive. It reveals Iran is under intense pressure from within and from outside. Every provocation, even if meant symbolically, can trigger escalation. The air is thick with tension, like powder, and Mars is the match beside it. But there is also glimmers of hope, at least potentials that are beginning to emerge, because planet Jupiter moves into the 12th house, and this opens space for quiet negotiations, hidden channels, secret talks, and diplomatic movements behind the scenes. Whether this will lead to real relief or resolution in the long run remains uncertain, because at the same time Rahu moves into the 8th house, and that brings a very different kind of energy. Rahu expands, and the 8th house means power plays, covert operations, nuclear themes, intelligence agencies, loss of control. It is not about what is visible, it is about what is not spoken aloud, but whose influence is even more powerful because of it. Rahu in Aquarius adds another layer: technological escalation, drones, cyber attacks, invisible warfare, international tensions that no longer respect borders, and growing distrust, even toward one's own allies. This is a field of high tension, where every symbol, every word, every action can trigger a ripple effect. These are not easy times, and they are certainly not transparent ones. The month of May is astrological a cosmic tipping point, a moment when it becomes clear which systems will remain and which will begin to collapse. We see it in politics, in economics, in society, but also, more importantly, within ourselves, because as much as we look outward, the real movement is happening inside. And many people feel it. I have to reorganize my life. I am tired. It's too much. And I don't always know where to place all of this. Even physically, these energies are asking more of us. It takes space for integration, for rest, for transformation. This month is high in frequency, and yes, it may feel intense and exhausting. The lunar nodes are shifting, Jupiter demands realignment, Pluto shakes us to the ground. But the most important thing is this: nothing can remain as it was, and that's a good thing, because with Jupiter in Gemini, ethic values, truthfulness, and lived integrity begin to return to the center. So do not be thrown off by what others think is right. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to carry what no longer feels aligned. Be clear within yourself. Use your own power, whether through conscious choices or supporting the right initiatives, or simply by living your truth and staying fair and human, even when it is hard. May is not asking you to freeze in fear. It is asking you to flow with the wave of change. And no matter what happens, you are held, you are loved, you are never, never, never alone. Remember, we are many. Breathe this energy in, breathe it out, and people become so aware and conscious. And this shifts everything and makes and opens the door for a new way of living and coming together in peace. So thank you so much for listening. Share this very long and important video with your friends, your community, and do not forget, whatever comes, I will still love you. Namaste.